The students that are in the art departments feel like they're the lowest of the low. It's so funny because in every other field, it's like, oh, let's make a product and then we'll sell it. I'm like, how is that any different in the art department? The only difference is your specialty is making the product. And so we've got to learn how to sell it. On my YouTube channel, and the two of us did all these like AI versus Carina. And the universal thing that came out of it that we realized.
From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Dandar.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable. So, Carina, what superpower would you like to bring to this particular episode?
This is so fun, but I would love to bring the superpower of making art that sells, which actually happens to also be the name of my new book.
Oh, love it. Love it. I know a lot of my listeners are creatives and they will be listening eagerly because I think that's been a real challenge for many creatives. One of the reasons I've never done art as a career was everybody used to say, artists don't make any money. So I think this is a really relevant topic. But before we get into that, Carina, you are from abroad. So I'd love to hear where you're calling from and tell me a bit about your background as well.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Tennessee in the United States. I currently live in Utah in the United States, and I come from an interesting background. My mom was an immigrant. My mom's Chinese, and my dad is white, redhead, with a lot of Norwegian background. So despite the fact that I am half Chinese, I have 3 kids, and 2 of them are bright redheads. They do not look like my children. So it's actually hilarious because they're a quarter Chinese. So my background, so I grew up in Tennessee, moved to Utah for school, met my husband in school, and I have a PhD in design from the University of Minnesota. I taught at the University of Minnesota Design and at the Arts Institute for about 5 years. I loved it. My specialty was typography, packaging design for the juniors and seniors. And I fell in love with design. And I didn't start there. I started in business and marketing and just thought design is exactly where it's at. And now live in Utah, 3 kids, a dog, 2 cats, and run my company called Carina Gardner Inc. And then we have a property under it called Design Suite, which is our design program.
Oh, nice. You sound like a very busy woman, especially with the kids and the dog. That must be hectic.
Mostly the dog. The dog likes to follow us everywhere and do everything with us. I'm surprised he's actually not in the office with me, bugging me during the middle of this podcast.
Well, I'm a new dog owner, so we've just had our dog for about a year now, and Milo has been keeping us on our feet, and he is just like a third child. So it's been a really interesting experience getting to know him. But what I love about him is he's the only one in the house that will actually listen to me, and he'll sit with me in the evening when I'm on my own, and I'll just be speaking to him out loudly about some of the thoughts of the day. And anyone else that sees this will think I'm a weirdo, but it's just my way of sharing some of my thoughts. I don't know if you ever knew that.
Yeah, that is the good thing about dogs. The other thing that's amazing about dogs, and we weren't big dog people before we got our dog, his name is Thunder. He's black and he's a little labradoodle. He is always happy. Nothing makes him sad. And I'm like, you're greeted at the door for this guy that's just so happy that you showed up. And so even if you're having a rough day, he's just so happy to see you.
Oh, I wish the kids could get some of that energy as well, because my kids are all over the place. Certain days they just don't want to be anywhere near you, and other days they're like super happy. Anyway, let's not go there. So, Carina, you mentioned you've written this new book. Well, first of all, why did you write it?
It's so funny. I got the idea for it. So sometimes I go lecture at universities. So even though I have a university type program that we're actually working towards getting accreditation for, right now it's a business professional design program. I will go lecture at universities, and I happened to be at one and I lectured to their entire art department. And what you were saying about art, you can't make money, you can't do anything. There's definitely that feeling still on university campuses. The students that are in the art departments feel like they're the lowest of the low. I think the professors actually feel that way as well. Like, we're not teaching, even though we feel like we're teaching a usable skill, there's like no one teaching business to these students so that they know like actual steps. Like, no, I'm not talking about an MBA. You do all these case studies and you like write a business plan. It's all made up. I'm talking about real life. Like, how do we make money from the things that we're making? And it's so funny because in every other field, it's like, oh, let's make a product and then we'll sell it. I'm like, how is that any different in the art department? The only difference is your specialty is making the product. And so we've got to learn how to sell it. And once I started really thinking about it, and I was thinking about these students, I did like a class just for the students who wanted to show up, not all 250. So I had probably 35 students show up and cram into this little space that I could talk to them. And I had this one boy come up to me. And he was like, what do? I'm a portrait artist. And he started showing me what he was doing. And I was just like, all right, I'm going to tell you the exact thing you have to do. You're going to do this. You're going to put it up at here. You're going to price it like this. And I was going to say, you're going to do this every day and you're going to do it over and over again. And it's going to be slow and it's going to suck at the beginning. And you're going to it's like all business, right? You're not going to make any money for the first little bit, but you're going to get some people to buy this. Okay. And as you keep moving forward, you're going to be fine. And he's like, do you really think I can do this? He was like, because I just don't want to work at Walmart the rest of my life. And I was just like, oh, this is where these art students think they're going to be, because they haven't figured out yet that it's not just art brain that works here. We have to have business brain. And so this book is for if anyone has ever felt like they just, that art is not for them. I broke down everything into what we call the Make Art That Sells formula. It's broken down onto all these little pieces so that's very crystal clear. Even our main thing is called the sales vehicle. That's the thing that pushes your eyes in front of audiences. We break it down into the 4 categories, explain the 4 categories, and how you absolutely have to have a sales vehicle before you start even creating the art. Like, how are we going to move this art to show it to people? How are eyeballs going to get on it? It's distribution. And I think artists, so many times they start with the art, but I think if you really started with thinking about how we're going to move this in front of people, it changes your art and it makes it so that you have a place for it to go.
So it's almost thinking about the customer first and the needs of the customer, and then adhering to that, which is what we normally do with most products, right?
Yeah, we just don't do it in art because we almost feel like we're going to lose self-expression. I actually think the opposite happens. We actually do better at our stuff because we produce a higher quality piece of art because we're excited because someone's going to actually use it. And so just like throwing paint on a canvas and just being like, oh, I'll see what happens. Instead, what happens is if I'm sitting down, I did a watercolor yesterday. I was thinking about, I'm going to sublimate this on a tote. Then I'm going to sit there and I'm going to make sure it fits specifications. I'm going to make sure it looks really beautiful because I'm going to be using it every day for my library books. Like, I start thinking about like how pretty it is and how I really want to showcase it so that it's really beautiful. And I think that because we think it's just art can just be self-expression, then we don't really go into it going like, if this was like really usable, if it was something that I was using every single day, I'd want it to be a certain level of prettiness or a certain level of art.
And how do you understand what it is that your customers are looking for? Are there techniques or easy ways for you to gauge that from people?
At the beginning, very difficult. And I'll tell you why. So at the beginning, this is why we actually really emphasize volume. So the more art you make, the better it's going to be. And the more art you put up to sell, like in an online platform or commissions or whatever sales vehicle you end up using, the more you put up, the smarter you get. And it's not because you're smarter, but because sales will tell you what is selling for you. So it's really at the very beginning, you're trying to build data for yourself. Because here's the thing, your art is different than my art, is different than my daughter's art. And so we can't gather data from other people, just like any product. It's like if you went into the marketplace and you started selling, I'm trying to think of something crazy. I'm looking at my heat press machine. My heat press machine. and I'm selling that. My heat press machine might have different buttons on it, has different settings on it than someone else's heat press machine. I can't go look at their data and know exactly how my heat press machine will work. I might be able to see some of it and go, ooh, that might help me a little bit. But for the most part, I'm still looking at my own data to understand whether that's a product that's going to sell for me. Same with our art, especially because our arts are all so different, right? And so the more that we dig into our own art style and really putting out more volume, the more data we can get to understand what is selling best from us. If I am drawing a landscape and I have this beautiful landscape up, and then I draw variations of it, and I have one that has birds, and I have one that's mostly trees, and I have one that's beaches, and I find the only thing that's selling well is everything that has deer in it. Guess what I'm going to do more of? Landscapes with more deer. Does that make sense? So it's like you're taking your own data and seeing what people like from you and getting much, much deeper into that so that you're actually making art that sells, that products that audiences actually really want.
And would you recommend actually going the full length and putting the art out there and selling it? Or could somebody put some posts on Instagram and seeing which ones get the most engagement? Like, are the two very different?
Very different. And I'll tell you why. The person who actually will buy your art will put money down. The person on Instagram is just going to give you their opinion. There are plenty of people who will give you opinions who will not buy. So I always know that the best person, the person who will actually buy my art, that's the voice I want to listen to. Because you might have like 2,500 people on Instagram come onto a post, say, oh, I like this. I love this. I think this is amazing. You put it up on a platform to sell it at, like pretend Etsy or like one of these art print platforms. You put it up to sell and no one buys it. It's crickets. What does that tell me? I have a bunch of people who like it who aren't willing to pay for it. That's not an opinion that actually matters or helps me. What matters to me is actually how many people who bought it. And it's so crazy because I've been doing this now for 16 years as a designer. And the thing that you think is the crappiest thing in your shop that you're selling always sells the best. Why? Why is this? It's so angering. You think you can predict what people want? You cannot. You can never predict what people want. What people will actually put down hard, cold cash down on, those are your demographic. That's your research. So if you think that I almost want to say it's a little bit of a cop out to put on Instagram or gallery and just say, vote for your favorite. Because at the end of the day, the only person that matters is the person who will actually buy it and put it up at their house.
Oh, great advice there. And I see what you're saying, because when you don't have skin in the game, then it's quite easy for people to like and dislike and all the other things that they do. And it's really where you got to put your hand in your pocket. That's what matters. And you mentioned the formula. So you've come up with this formula. Could you break that down a little bit more for us?
It's actually relatively easy. There are a lot of components to it, but the big component is your sales vehicle. It covers the entire formula. It's the thing we sit underneath and there's a box around it. So sales vehicle is everything, because you can keep everything the same in the formula, but change your sales vehicle. A sales vehicle, there are 4 pieces to it. Gallery representation. So those who like to try to work with galleries. Commissions, which can be personal commissions. It can be manufacturers. So for example, I'm a fabric designer. So I work directly with Riley Blake. They are a commission because they give me a percentage of royalty for all of the fabric I produce for them, right? Then third is shows. So like art fairs, shows, Basil's one of them, any kind of wholesale show, or a craft show, anything where you actually have eyeballs right in front of you. And then the fourth one is online platforms, which I just talked about. My personal love is online platforms, low barrier to entry. You get a lot of data at the beginning and a lot of money. Most of my several hundreds of thousands that I make in a year come from online platforms, not from my commissions, which is ironic and crazy. So we've got the sales vehicle. Then we have a little trifecta. We have a little set of 3 that kind of all go together, and it's medium, theme, and product. And what we do is, for example, medium is whatever you create your art in. So if it's oil painting, that would be the medium. Theme is what's the overall idea around here. So landscapes would be one, or birds. Maybe you were a bird advocate and you do a lot of bird drawings, right? And then product is deciding, this is the usable piece. how is it going to be showcased? And so a lot of artists choose art print, which is, by the way, the worst product category you can choose. There's only so much wall space that people have on their walls. So instead, if you can think of something that people can use, dish towels, tumblers, mugs, like anything like that. And then you put those three together, we cover it over with style. So your style develops because these three things that you mesh together are going to be different than everybody else's. You might have a few people who are in the same categories, but think about those three things. You can mix it up. Adobe Illustrator with your theme is girl and your product is tumblers, right? Like that's going to be your special mix. And when you create that, your style is getting developed under it. In this book, which is really, it's fun, I use fine artists that you guys all know. So I think in this particular one, I showed like Andy Warhol and I showed Norman Rockwell. So like Andy Warhol, he's doing screen printing, right? For his like Campbell soup or whatever. His subject matter was the Campbell soup cans. And then the way he was selling it was art prints, right? So like that was his like mix for creating that particular thing. Overall, his style that was created from that, bold, very clean, super modern, right? So we get that whole piece. So that's the art piece of the formula. Then we do a plus volume, which is number of product, because people think they can create like 10 or 200 things and they think that they're good. And that's really not the case. Pablo Picasso came out with 50,000 pieces during his years as an artist. And every chapter highlights a different artist. We do Kusama, Picasso, Da Vinci, Van Gogh. So it's a really fun book because we do the formula with artists. And so you get a little piece, Monet. It's really fun. So volume is a big deal and people don't put enough time into volume. And so then we have volume and then we have time. So the amount of time being put in. And then the last piece of it is what we call pivots or adjustments. So making adjustments to pieces of the formula as things are not working. And it all equals what we call differentiation or what most of us know as brand. So in order to build a brand, we have to have all of these different pieces of the formula at play. And it's really great I'm going to give you guys a freebie here at the end, our masterclass for this for free. And the cool thing is we have a worksheet and you can fill in all of your own pieces. And it's so great because suddenly it's not a mystery why your stuff isn't selling. If you can't figure out one of your pieces, it means that your customers probably can't figure it out either. So like if you don't have enough volume, like you only have 10 products up there, you can just look at it and go, well, that's the problem. I don't have enough stuff for people to buy, right? If you've only been doing it for 2 weeks, well, I haven't been spending enough time doing this, right? One of my good friends, David Mickle, who was the artist for Wes Anderson's Asteroid City, he told me that it took him 7 years before he started getting gallery showings. It takes a long time to get where you need to go. And so I see that the people who persevere in this industry are those who are willing to do it day in and day out with very little compensation, because they will get compensated in the end.
And if somebody out there is perhaps not selling art, can they still apply these principles to other forms of products?
The answer is yes. For the most part, yes. So I have 3 kids. My 2 oldest daughters, one's in animation and one wants to be an author. And we use these exact same principles for writing. Creative writing is exactly the same thing. The only difference is very clearly the product is always going to be a book, right? It's going to probably be a manuscript of some sort. So your product doesn't change, but your themes and your mediums might change. The way you write it, the way, what you're writing about, right, will change. And it will be in your own style. So same deal there. And then the number of books, it's so crazy because I've joined several masterminds and I met someone who basically was doing exactly the same thing I was doing in design, but she was doing it in novels. And I was like, oh my God, she was making $500,000 a year in novels. And I was just like, you just don't, and all self-published, she wasn't some huge well-known name. I was like, this is so crazy because people think you have to be like a New York Times bestseller to make lots of money, or you have to. And she was just like, yeah, it's just like, she was like, I publish 4 a year. So it's like her volume was higher. Most people are like writing a book once every 2 to 3 years. And she was like, I publish 4 every single year. And so it's like the volume that you create really matters. And then the amount of time you're willing to put into it, because of course that didn't happen in the first probably 5 years that she was doing it. It takes a while to build up. And then she was pivoting changing her theme, changing the way she wrote, changing the publishing houses she was using to make it work. So it's exactly the same thing. You just are doing it in your different creative field.
We mentioned a little bit about creativity at the start when you and I were talking off air, and I was explaining to you how one of the reasons I started this podcast was because my daughter said to me one day, "Daddy, I don't want to have a career in computers. I want to be creative." And I really wanted to give creatives a bit of a voice as well. And that's why we get great people like yourself coming on and sharing your stories. And you're phenomenally successful. And we were talking again before we kicked off how your business is expanding. You've just taken on lots of new people. So if someone out there is working in this field of creativity, but they're concerned about that dreaded 2-letter acronym, AI, then is there still hope for us, or should we be looking to pivot into something completely different?
Yeah, I think not only is there a lot of hope for us, I think we need it more than ever before. I think as someone who has been successful at creativity, which is crazy because so many people are like, I'm a starving artist. And I'm like, I'm not. And I'm not going to let anybody who works with me, all of our designers, not starving artists. They all make money doing this. This is what we try to have them do. A lot of them are painters, they're hand drawing. And then, of course, the technology bit, which nobody loves. We still have to learn enough to get it out there, out into the universe. But AI is so scary for people. Mostly I've decided because they're not actually using it. On my YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/Carina Gardner, I had one of my design coaches come to my house and the two of us did all these like AI versus Carina. And so one of us would run AI and the other one would just design. And we like put on timers and we were like doing all this stuff. And the universal thing that came out of it that we realized was that while AI is very creative, right? It's coming up with ideas for you. Almost always, none of the artwork actually works for designers the way we need it to be working. So for example, I'm a die cut designer. So I design for Silhouette, or you could, like Cricut is the one that most people know about. So Silhouette or Cricut, it's a die cutting machine. The files have to be vectorized and they have to be layered in order for someone to cut it on that machine. AI only produces pixel-based images. And that means they can only blow up to a certain size. And most of them will only blow up to like 12 by 18. It's really not very big. So if you have someone and it makes you a logo, say it makes a logo for you. If you're a designer and you hand that logo over to a client, okay, because you're like, oh, I got it. This is perfect. That client's going to be super angry at you because that logo will not blow up to a huge size that they might need on the side of their building. This actually just barely happened. One of my friends who's a gymnastics owner said, I have this logo. And she was like, and they didn't give it to me. I sent it to the printer. And the printer's like, we can't print this. And she was like, why? And he was like, it's pixel based. Like we can't, it's a JPEG. We can't make this bigger. And she was like, Carina, how do you make it bigger? And I was like, fine. I took it, I vectorized it, I rebuilt the entire logo, right? And then handed it over and the printer could print it like a huge, like it was like 8 foot by 10 foot or something huge. AI does not do that. AI, if you are designing directly into Procreate and you're designing directly digitally, you better be working at humongous scales so that you can work in it later and vectorize it later if you might need it that way. So there's so much production being done by designers. I do think there's going to be a lot more production designers if people are using AI because you're going to be spending all your time cleaning up the file, building all the layers. So there's all this work. The creative work goes away with AI if you're not careful. And so the problem is, we talked about this, AI all looks the same right now. And I think it's going to continue to look the same for a while. So why do we need designers still? The more you can build your own brand, your own look, your own style, the better it's going to be for you. Because I think people are going to crave different looks out there that they cannot get from AI. And I think it's going to get worse and worse. Furthermore, everyone who is just using AI to design, they're going to be out of the job at some point, or they're just doing the same thing over and over again. Because when everyone has access to something, then it's no longer special. So the best you can do as an artist is create even more special things with your own style, with your own hands. I think there is going to be a little bit of a lashback to handmade and that beauty that comes there. We saw this in the 1890s with William Morris and the arts and crafts movement when industrialization was happening. He did the exact same thing. It was a lashback, and that's why he started Kelmscott Press, because he was like, I want things to be handmade. Now, is it going to mean that everything's handmade? No, I think AI is going to really help us try to modernize a few different things that we're doing. And I really hope it modernizes a few things for us as designers. But in terms of creativity, I just wouldn't worry about it right now. So that's my 2 cents about AI.
Oh, that's good to know. I was thinking about this quite a bit, actually, and we had a discussion about this the other day. I was co-hosting an event, and that exact point came up, that because AI is all looking very similar, it's not really giving you an edge at the moment. And we had a guest on, actually, on this event, and he was showing the difference between a hand-drawn visual that he'd put out on his social media versus AI-generated visuals. And there's a massive difference in terms of engagement. And there's just something about hand-drawn stuff. I don't know what it is. The best example I could think of, Carina, was when you receive a card, like a Christmas card, and you get some that are printed, but then others that are handmade. And you always treat the handmade ones with special care, don't you? Because it feels like someone's put some effort into that versus the machine-made stuff. So yeah, I don't know what it is about handmade.
Well, and even, I would say there's even 3 tiers of that. I was just thinking about the cards I received this year. So you get the handmade ones, right? Which you like feel guilty about throwing away because you're like, oh my gosh, someone like put a little button on this and sewed a little ribbon on it. It's like, oh my gosh, like I feel guilty about giving it. Then the second one, which is where it's a picture of the family and they maybe used a template, which is what I do, template with like a Merry Christmas. And then there's a third one, which is like there's no picture of the family at all. It's just like someone signed a card and put it on. What's the least special? Well, it's just the store-bought card one where they just sign their name and then that was it. And I think there are going to be also levels in AI with that as well, and in our homemade stuff, right? I think that there's a reason we like to see faces and we like to see real people, and we like to know the story behind the artwork. I think there's a reason why many of the artists that we talk about, Vincent van Gogh, Monet, Picasso, is because they all had stories, interesting stories, right? And so not only was the artwork good, but then we also understood the story behind it. AI doesn't have a story behind it. And so the more you can humanize your artwork, the more likely people are going to resonate with it. And so I think there's a lot to be said about humanizing the art experience. I even think about famous artists right now, like Banksy, right? People are fascinated by him because he does like outlandish stuff. But also there feels like there's always a story going on with it. And so it makes it interesting and it makes it newsworthy, right? And AI is just simply, I'm going to be very surprised if in the art world, at least, that it's going to be able to do what we need it to do in order to create that humanizing experience.
And Carina, we're running fast out of time. I was going to ask you one of my favorite questions. So if I could give you any superpower in the world to abolish something in the world of work, what would that be for you?
Oh my gosh, that I was like, this is so easy. And it is production time for designers. If we could have AI or anyone, if the superpower could be that they could, it's so crazy because they took over the creative part, but that doesn't do any favors for designers or humanity who are working. What would be very helpful if they knew how to organize files and zip them up and make them perfect and then sell it to a manufacturer for us. And like all the things that actually require humans to do right now, which I would love if AI would take over or anyone would take over. I would love to abolish that for every designer, because that is the thing all my designers are grumpy about. They're like, Carina, I just want to design and create. I don't want to have to zip up files, organize them, create previews, make everything super ready for the customer. That's not fun.
That kind of reminds me of my podcast editing at times when I'm dreading to go through the podcast because I've got to now edit it all. But in a way, it can sometimes be quite a creative experience as well. So maybe not quite the same, but I hear you on that one. Right, Carina, we're gonna abolish the production side for a whole 24 hours just to give you a bit more time back. Yeah, there we go. So, Carina, if people want to get in touch with you and also find out more about the free masterclass you talked about, could you give us some details?
Yeah. So, okay, I would love for you guys to get the masterclass. It's 6 lessons from the Make Art That Sells book. So if you go to makeartbook.com and it's the second link, you'll see there's a masterclass right there. Click on the second link and use the code. It's right now, it's got a price on it. Do not worry about the price. Put in the code MAKEART. And if you put that code in, it will completely get rid of the price. You can register it for absolutely free. 6 lessons, couple of fun bonuses. And there's like the launch party for the book if you want to go in there and watch some of that or whatever. But I lay out, I show some of the art, like I'm showing you some Vincent van Gogh and some Da Vinci and all of that. It's really fun. And I lay out the formula. So, and then there's a worksheet in there so that you can lay out the art yourself. The book is available on Amazon. It's the second book that I've done myself. The first book is called Design, Profit, and Prosper. And that one is a quick read. This is also a quick read. It's meant to be a fun read. We'll get you there. So that is, I would highly recommend you go do that. It's totally free and it's meant to be really fun. If you want to check out me, just come to Instagram at Carina Gardner, CarinaGardner, and come hang out with me there. And then hopefully we'll also have Patty over on my podcast on Make and Design with Carina Gardner. And that will be really fun as well.
Oh, I can't wait, Carina. Thank you so much. And we'll include those links in the show notes as well, so people don't have to drive and remember all that stuff. So that'll be in the show notes, folks. So don't worry. Carina, I just want to thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I feel like this real positive energy coming from you. And it's always interesting whenever you have a guest that you've never met before and you've literally got like half an hour to get to know them and build that rapport. But I found it's been seamless with you, and that's all that positivity coming out. So I do want to thank you for your time today and all the great insights you've shared.
Oh, I have loved being here. Don't you think it's just creatives who are really excited to share like creativity with the world and help other people get there, right? Like, because I think that's the one nice thing about, especially the artists and the creative community, is that it's really not a place you want to hang out alone. It really isn't. Like, it's way more fun with people who are all doing what they love. It's just way more powerful.
Oh, what a great way to finish off. So there you go, creatives out there in the world. You've got a big shout out there. So keep being positive. That's the message, I think. So thank you so much. It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.